How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud Tutor. So Daf Mem 45 of Masechta Sotah. Friends. Today we start the 9th parak of Masechta Sotah. Friends, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Isn't really the right word. I don't feel overwhelmed. I just feel like we got a mountain to climb together today. Like, I don't know. I can't remember the last time we had a daf that was an hour. This might be an hour daf. It might be an hour. The last 7 daf of Masechta Sotah, I don't know exactly what happened, right? Because Tosfos ends on daf Mem Beis and says Me'elu Tosfos lo matzasi yoser. I didn't find any more Tosfos. It almost implies there is more Tosfos. We just don't know what happened to it. Usually when there's humongous pages, it's because it's a Gadata and there's just not so much Tosfos, so there's just a lot more room for to fill up the page with text. But this, I don't know what happened to the Tosfos, but here there's just a lot more text on the page, and it's not quick. So I'm stalling over here just because I'm looking at this and I'm like, shnikes, but okay, here we go. We were talking about the mitzvah of Egla Arufa. Egla Arufa is when they find a corpse in between two cities, and they don't know the story, and they measure and they find which city is closer, and the elders, they go out and part of the thing is that they take a calf and they kill it in a barren nachal, stream thingy, canyon. So yeah, that is Egla Arufa. So, and that's what the parak is called. It's called the parak of the Egla Arufa. Here we go. Daf Mem Daled Amud Beis at the new parak at the Mishnah. Egla Arufa. Ho. So in Egla Arufa, B'loshen Kodesh. Okay, fine. You have to say right. They say V'anu V'amu Yadeinu Lo Shafchu. Right. Saddam is that what it says? Something like that. Yadeinu Lo Shafchu. Saddam is V'enenu Lo Ra'u. So this happens in Hebrew. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Ki motzi cholol b'hadameh, that if you find a corpse, v'yotzu zekenecha v'shovtecha, and so the Gemara is going to ask exactly how does this teach that it's in Lashon Kodesh, but okay, we'll get there. So you find a corpse on the ground, v'yotzu zekenecha v'shovtecha, and your elders and your judges go out, shloshim ibezdin hagadol shebiyushalayim or yotzin, and this was 3 judges from the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. They would go out to be part of the Egla Arufa ceremony proceedings. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Chamisha. Yehuda says it wasn't 3, it was 5. Shenemar, the pasuk says Zikenecha Shnaim v'Shovtecha Shnaim. Right? Zikenecha is 2, Shovtecha is another 2. Ve'ein bezdin shokul, and you can't have a bezdin that could potentially be split in half and be even, right? Undecided, right? If you have 4 judges, then they might split 2 and 2. So Mosifin Alein Od Echad, we add another one, so it's an odd number, so that there will definitely be a majority. Nimtza Tamun Bagal, if you find the corpse hidden in a pile, right, covered in a pile, Otali Be'ilan, or hanging in a tree, Otzaf Al Pnei Hamayim, or floating on the water, Lo Hayu Orphan. So in that case, they would not do the whole Egla Arufa thing. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Ba'adome. It has to be on the ground, v'lo tamun, not hidden, not covered. Bagal, v'lo tamun bagal, and not covered in a pile of stones. Nofel v'lo talui, fallen and not hanging in a tree. Talui be'ilan, not hanging in a tree. Basode v'lo tzaf al pnei hamayim, and in a field and not floating on water. Nimtza samuch l'svar, if you find the corpse close to in the boondocks, close to an outlying, a far out city, near the border, or the ir sheruba of the kochavim, or to a city that is a majority of idolaters, or the ir she'enba bezdin, or a city that does not have it in it a court, lo hayu orphan, then they would not do. Then they would not do the Egla Arufa proceedings. A modin el ir she'eshbo bezdin, we only measure to a city that has a court, and the Gemara is going to explain. Why we have to say that we don't measure to a city that doesn't have bezdin, if we already said that we don't measure to a city that doesn't have a bezdin. Okay. Says the Gemara, Maika Omer. So how do we learn that Egla Arufa needs to be in Lashon Kodesh? So Maika Omer, Omer Baba Achi Komer. Well, this is how you have to understand the Mishnah. Shenemar, that it has to be in Lashon Kodesh, as it says, Ve'anu ve'amru, right? That the elders, they say, Ve'anu ve'amru, lo yadeinu lo shavchu, es adamazeh, etc. So Ulahalanu Omer, and it says by Hargrizim and Har Eval ve'anu alevim ve'amru ve'gomer, that the Levites answered and said, Ma Aniyah amur lahalan b'lashon kodesh, just like when it says Aniyah by Hargrizim and Har Eval, it's lashon kodesh, Afkan b'lashon kodesh. So also here by Hargrizim, no, also here by Egla Rufa, it's also in Lashon Kodesh. And then the Mishnah continues and says, V'seder Egla Arufa Ketzad, and then the Mishnah continues, how is the Seder, how does Egla Arufa go? Ki motzi cholav adoma, well, if you find a corpse in the ground, v'yotzu zikinecha v'shoftech, and your elders and your judges go out, shloshim bezdin agadol shebishalayim yotzin, and 3 judges from the bezdin in Jerusalem will go out. It's so weird. It's a Friday afternoon. It says I should have like plenty of time till Shabbos, like at least an hour. And yet, it's like really dark outside. I'm like looking at like all my different clocks to make sure I'm like not crazy, but it's 5:30 in the afternoon. Shabbos starts at like 6:45 or something, 6:50. So I have plenty of time, but maybe it's just like cloudy outside. It's so weird. Like it totally feels like it's about to be Shabbos. But then again, that like big horn didn't horn. So, alright. Fine. Alright, where are we? Here we go. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Chamisha. Ho 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 ho. Begomer. So, we saw machlokas in the Mishnah between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda about, are there 3 judges from the Sanhedrin or 5 judges? And we're going to see now that the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Tana Rabbanan, the Rabbi Stav, V'yotzu zekenecha v'shovtecha, zekenecha shnayim, v'shovtecha shnayim, ve'im bezdin shakol, musifin alei nod echad, arei kan chamisha de Rabbi Yehuda. Ho ho. Let's read that again. So we learn in a brayse, V'yotzu zekenecha v'shovtecha, that your elders and your judges go out. Zekenecha shnayim is 2, v'shovtecha shnayim is another 2, ve'im bezdin shakol, and you can't have a bezdin that can split in half and be divided in half. So musifin alei nod echad. So you add another one, so it's an odd number, so that we're guaranteed a majority. Harei kan chamisha de Rabbi Yehuda. That is 5 judges. That is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Shimon Omer zekenecha shnayim ve'im bezdin shakol musifin alei nod echad arei kan shlosha. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says no, zekenecha is 2, and then we stop there. And you can't obviously have something that can be divided in half, so you add another one, so we get 3. Rabbi Shimon Ami Yoksiv v'shovtecha. No, but Rabbi Shimon, what about the word v'shovtecha? What about the word v'shovtecha? What do you do with that? Rabbi Yehuda learns out another 2. What do you do with it? That it's not just any judges, it's judges from the Sanhedrin. Rabbi Yehuda miziknei zikenecha nafka. Rabbi Yehuda says, oh, the Sanhedrin, I know it has to be from the Sanhedrin because it could have just said ziknei, but it says zikenecha. Zikenecha means that it has to be Sanhedrin judges. Rabbi Shimon fires back. If it only says ziknei, havamina filo ziknei ashuk. Even just elders from the market, but not Sanhedrin. Because of Rachman is Zikenecha. So therefore it doesn't say Zikne, it says Zikenecha. But because of Rachman is Zikenecha, if it only said Zikenecha, Avamina afilu Sanhedrin ketana, I might think judges from a 23-person Bezdin, not the Sanhedrin Agadol in Jerusalem. Because of Rachmana Vishovtecha, therefore it then says Vishovtecha, to say that no, it's not Sanhedrin ketana, it's the Sanhedrin Gadol. It has to be the cream of the crop. Rabbi Yehuda Gomar Ziknei Miziknei Eda. Now, how does Rabbi Yehuda know that these have to be from the Sanhedrin, not just a Sanhedrin Ketana? Well, he has a Gezerah Shava. That it says Ziknei by Egla Rufa and Ziknei by Parhelim Davar Shel Tzibur. Who can tell me what Parhelim Davar Shel Tzibur is? Parhelim Davar Shel Tzibur is when the entire congregation when Bezdin rules that something is permitted, so the entire congregation goes and does it, assuming that it's permitted, then it turns out that actually it was forbidden, so there's a cow that is brought as a korban. That's what's called a Parhelim Davar Shel Tzibur, and as part of that, so it says Ziknei there as well. So malahalam yuchadin shebe'eda avkam yuchadin shebe'eda. And just like by Paralim Davar Shal Tzibor, it's the Sanhedrin. So here also, where you have the Gzeir Shava of Zikne, so just like over there, it's the Sanhedrin. So here Oichit, by the Egla Rufa, it is the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. Igamar Ligmar Lekula Milsa, Hasam, Haha, fact the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda, if you have this fancy Gzeir Shava, so don't just use it to teach that it has to be Sanhedrin, use it for the whole thing. That just like over there it's 5 judges, according to Rabbi Yehuda, so here also it would be 5 judges. So why do I need Zikenecha v'Shovtecha Lomeli? How come by Egla Rufa we even have to write Zikenecha v'Shovtecha Bichlal? We have Gzeir Shava of Zikne, and just learn out the whole thing from Ba'elim Davar Shal Tzibur. They have to be the Sanhedrin, there have to be 5 judges. Why do I need Zikenecha over here by Egla Rufa? So rather, Rabbi Yehuda changes his tune. Elavav vishovtecha leminyana. So Rabbi Yehuda changes his tune. There's no longer is he relying upon Gzeir Shava. There's no Gzeir Shava. Rather, the way that Rabbi Yehuda learns out 5 is like this. It says zikenecha. That's 2. The vav of vishovtecha is adding. It's coming to add on another 2. Vein bez and shakol. So add another one. That's 5. And then from shovtecha they learn out that it has to be the Sanhedrin. Whereas Reb Shimon vav lo mashmali. Reb Shimon doesn't hold of that extra vav. He doesn't learn anything from the vav. So therefore, Reb Yehuda says zikenecha is 2. The vav of Shovtecha is another 2, and then essentially he gets the 5. Shovtecha is that it has to be Sanhedrin. That's going to Reb Yehuda. Reb Shimon says, look, zikenecha is 2. Doesn't learn anything out from the vav. And Shovtecha is it has to be from the Sanhedrin, and that's how Reb Yehuda gets the 5. That's how Reb Shimon gets the 3. Friends, we're mamish on the first line of Daf Mem Hey Amud Aleph, and we're about 12 minutes into the Daf. I'm telling you, this might be an hour. It might be an hour Daf. Elameata v'yatzu shnaim u'modadu shnaim ho. Perfecti Gemara. If that's the case, then if we're learning out from Zikenecha, Shovtecha, what about v'yatzu u'modadu? Shouldn't that be another 4? Right? Yatzu shnaim, madadu shnaim. Rabbi Yehuda arei kan tisha, Rabbi Shimon arei kan shiva. Say that according to Rabbi Yehuda, 5 and 4 is 9. According to Rabbi Shimon, 3 and 4 is 7. No. Yatzu and madadu is needed for the following brisa. V'yatzu hein v'lo shluchein. They go out, not their emissaries, not their messengers. Umadadu, and they measure shafilu nimtza ba'alu la'ir. Even if it's obvious what the closest city is, hayumodadin. Still, you measure the distance between the corpse and the city. Lasok shemitzvah lasok b'medida, because it's a mitzvah. Part of the mitzvah of Egla Rufa is to do the measurement. So even though if it's obvious what the closest city is, you still measure the distance from the corpse to the city. Masnisin de lo Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Now the Gemara says that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. How come? The Tanya is we learn in the Brayso. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Zikenecha zo Sanhedrin. When it says Zikenecha, that's the Sanhedrin. Shovtecha ze Melech v'Kohen Gadol. When it says Shovtecha, that's a reference to the king and the high priest also need to come out. Melech tichsiv Melech b'mishpat Yamir Eretz. Oh gosh, it's worthless for me to look at this. I can't read it, it's too small. I think it's Aretz. Okay, that a king in Mishpat, Yamir Aretz, he upholds the land, so Shovtecha is a reference to the king. And also, Kohen Gadol Dichsev Uvasa Ela Koyanim, what? Ela Koyanim Alavim Ve'el HaShofet Asher V'Gomer, and I guess Shofet in that case is referring to the Kohen Gadol. So therefore, Shovtecha is referring to the king and the Kohen Gadol. Now, Ibayla, they ask the Kasha, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov ben Melech v'Kohen Gadol hu depolig. Do we say that when Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is arguing against our Mishnah, against Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, is it only with regard to the king and the Kohen Gadol and the high priest? Right, to the fact that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov requires that the king and the high priest also come to the Egla Rufa proceedings? Aval b'Sanhedrin, ikar Rabbi Yehuda, ikar Rabbi Shimon svirlei. But with regard to the Sanhedrin, he agrees either with Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Shimon, i.e. that only 3 members or 5 members respectively from the Sanhedrin would show up. O Dilma, or perhaps Bisanedri Nami Polig, maybe he also argues on Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon with regard to how many judges come from the from the Sanhedrin. Adika Kula Sanhedrin Imamish. I have no clue I just said, but or does Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov also argue with regard to the Sanhedrin that whereas Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda say 3 and 5 respectively, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov requires the entire Sanhedrin to come. So that's the question, right? Does Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov agree with either Rabbi Shimon or Rabbi Yehuda with regard to how many judges from the Sanhedrin come, or does he have his own opinion, which is the entire Sanhedrin needs to come? Amar of Yosef Toshma. Says of Yosef coming here. Mitza'on zokein mamre abe page. Who can tell me what a zokein mamre is? Well, zokein mamre is a fellow, I guess a Talmud Chacham even, who paskins halacha differently in opposition to what the Sanhedrin paskins. So the Sanhedrin paskins a certain halacha, and this posek, this other person is pasking halacha not like the Sanhedrin is paskening. And then he comes to Jerusalem, and Bezdin and Sanhedrin confirms their opinion, and he nonetheless continues to paskin halacha unlike the Sanhedrin. We got to kill the fellow. So, but he has to come to Jerusalem and have a session with the Sanhedrin before we kill him. So Mitzon Zakin Mamre Abe Page. So what if the Zakin Mamre finds the Sanhedrin, but they're not in the Beis HaMikdash, they're not in the Lishkas HaGazis, they're elsewhere in Jerusalem. V'himra Bepage, Rashi says, just anywhere within sort of the boundaries of Jerusalem. V'himra Alein, and that is where he sort of heard their psak, and from there he went and went against them. But he didn't actually meet them in the temple. Yochel Tehei Amra also Amra. Is it possible that would be enough to qualify as a Zakin Mamre? He didn't meet them in the Sanhedrin, but he met them elsewhere in Jerusalem. Talmudomer v'kamto v'alisa elamakom. That the pasuk says no. Part of the requirements for a Zakin Mamre is that he would have to meet them in the temple, in the Lishkas HaGazis, and therefore, if he meets them elsewhere in Jerusalem, he would not be a Zakin Mamre based on that encounter. Melamich HaMakom Gorim, it teaches that it has to be in the Lishkas HaGazis, in the temple. Dinafu Kama, Nafrek the Gemara. Okay, so we just said that the Zakin Mamre bumps into the Sanhedrin somewhere in Jerusalem, outside of the temple, and we say that the reason why he's not a Zakin Mamre is because this took place outside of the temple. Fine, so the reason why he's not a Zakin Mamre is because of the location where the encounter happened. Now, how many judges were there for this encounter? And if you say, well, only a few judges were there, well then I have a different reason why he's not a Zakin Mamre. Maybe the ones that were not elsewhere in Jerusalem who bumped into him, maybe the ones who were in the Lishkas HaGazis agreed with the opinion, with this alternative opinion. So, if only a few of the judges from the Sanhedrin were bumped into this Zakin Mamre outside of the temple, well then he wouldn't be a Zakin Mamre anyways, because how do you know that those who were in the Lishkas HaGazis, maybe they agreed with him? And we're saying the only reason why he's not a Zakin Mamre is just because of the location. But in this case, there's another issue. That it was only, some of the judges. We need maybe the ones who were in the Lishkas HaGazis agree with this other person. So Dilma, Ella, Pshita Dunafakulu. So it must be that all of the Sanhedrin bumped into this Zakin Mamre. So all of the Sanhedrin had left the temple, had left the Lishkas HaGazis, they were somewhere else in Jerusalem, and that is where the Zakin Mamre bumped into them. They had an encounter, right? The Sanhedrin explained their position, and he went and continued to pass him. But we say he's not a Zakin Mamre because this encounter happened outside the temple. Ulamai, how come the entire Sanhedrin was outside of the temple, outside of the Lishkas HaGazis? If they just went to get pizza, can the entire Sanhedrin just leave the Lishkas HaGazis, leave the temple, and go buy pizza? The pasuk says that the judges of the Sanhedrin, Agan Asar is a moon, right? They have to be in the half moon, right? They have to be in the Lishkas HaGazis, where they sat in like a half moon so that everybody could see each other. Al Yechzer HaMozeg, and Mozeg is like limzog, is like to dilute wine with water, right? You have 1 part wine to 2 parts water. So here also, you always have to have at least 1/3 of the Sanhedrin in the Lishkas HaGazis. So they can't just all go out and get pizza. So how come they were out? How come the entire Sanhedrin was outside of the Lishkas HaGazis? Shem nitzoch echad mehem lotzes. Wait, what did you say? If somebody needs to leave the Lishkas HaGazis, as long as there's 1/3 of the Sanhedrin left, as long as there's at least 23 left, which is the size of a Sanhedrin Kitana, then you can leave, as long as there's 23 of the Sanhedrin left in the Lishkas HaGazis. But if there are less than 23, Eino Yotze, then you can't leave. So we see that you can't just have the entire Sanhedrin leave and go get pizza. So why was the entire Sanhedrin outside of the Lishkas HaGazis? Elapshita lidvar mitzvah. So it must be that they had a reason to be outside of the temple, that they were going for a mitzvah. Lemai. Now, what mitzvah were they going to do? Lav limdidas egla Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Finally, here's the proof. So why was the entire Sanhedrin outside of Lishkas HaGazis? It must be because they were going to participate in an Egla Arufa ceremony. And it must be that this Brisa is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who says that the entire Sanhedrin goes, and he disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, who say only 5 and 3 respectively. He says all of the Sanhedrin, and they were going to do the Egla Arufa. Amalei Abai lo. He says, no, Dilma lo'osif al ir v'al azoris. Maybe the entire Sanhedrin had left the Lishkas HaGazis because they wanted to add on to the city of Jerusalem, or to the Azoris of the temple. Gedetanan, as we learned in the Mishnah at the beginning of Sanhedrin, in Mosifin al ir v'al azoris, that we don't add on to Jerusalem or to the temple. Ella bebezdin shel shivim ve'echad. It has to be with the Sanhedrin. So Abai says, look, you could say that they were left the Lishkas HaGazis to participate in that. Tanya Kavasu to Rav Yosef. Nonetheless, the Gemara says we have a brisa to support Rav Yosef that this brisa is talking about that the entire Sanhedrin went to participate in Egla Arufa. Mitzona Beis Page, that if the Zaken Mamre bumped into the Sanhedrin outside of the temple, elsewhere in Jerusalem, v'himra alein, and then he rebelled against them. Kigon, for example, sheyotzu lemedidas egla. For example, they had left the Sanhedrin, they had left the Lishkas HaGazis in order to participate, to measure for the Egla Arufa, or lahosif alayir v'alazoris, alternatively to add on to the city or to the Azaris. Yachote Amra, also Amra, would this rebellion of this Zaken Mamre be considered a rebellion? Talmud Lomar v'kamta v'alisa mulam shamokum gorim. No, this encounter would have to be in the Lishkas HaGazis, not elsewhere in Jerusalem. So we see in this brisa that Davka, the entire Sanhedrin, had left in order to participate in the Egla Arufa potentially, and therefore that would support Rav Yosef, who says that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion would be that the entire Sanhedrin goes to participate in the Lishkas, in the Egla Arufa, and this brisa is like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Fine. So now the daf gets very, very wide, and a little bit slow. Okay. Nimtza tomun bagal otole be'ilon. So it's eerily quiet, which, look, I don't have a problem with, especially not while I'm recording Babylon Talmud. But it's so weird. It's a Friday afternoon. There's still an hour to Shabbos, but it's mamish like getting dark out. It's super quiet. It's kind of weird, but I guess I'll take a look afterwards. Honestly, if I have some quiet, let's go weiter, especially because we got some work to do over here. So nimtza tamun bagal otole be'ilon. So if you have this corpse who is hidden in a pile, covered in a pile of stones, or otole be'ilon, or hanging in a tree. So we said that it would not be, you would not do an egla arufa. You're not doing Egla Rufa. So let's say that the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. Let's say that the Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and is not the opinion of the rabbis. How come? The Tanis, we learn in the Brisa, V'shachachta omer basodeh. When it comes to shechicha, tell me what shechicha is. Shechicha is that if a fellow is harvesting his field and he forgets certain sheaves, so you leave it for the poor people. So prat litamun, but that excludes if the sheaves were covered. If they were covered, so then it's not shechicha. Tiv Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. V'chacham omrim basodeh l'rabos esatamun. And we're going to see in a minute how they learn it out. But the Chacham say that when it says basada, it's to include if a sheaf is hidden, covered sheaves. So what do we see? So we see that when it comes to shechicha, Rabbi Yehuda excludes tamun, covered, and the Chacham include tamun. So our Mishnah, which excludes tamun from egla rufa, so that is like Rabbi Yehuda with regard to shechicha. Amar Rav, whereas Rav says you can't necessarily, draw a parallel between shechicha and egla arufa. I feel tema rabbanon. You can even say that our Mishnah, the rabbis would agree with that. By egla arufa, tamun is excluded, even though it's included by shechicha, because they just look at each pasuk separately. They look at the psukim by Egla Arufa, and they analyze them, and they analyze the psukim by shechicha, and from Egla Arufa they conclude that covered is excluded, and by shechicha they conclude that covered is included. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Okay, the crux is that the pasuk. What did I say? Oh, okay, fine. As it says by Egla Arufa, ki motzei chalal. That it says if you find a corpse, wherever you find it, anywhere, covered, not covered. But when it says ba'adama, on the ground, okay, prat l'tamun, that excludes if it's covered. So that the rabbis will say, okay, so by egla arufa, it seems that covered is excluded. But v'hasam, however, when it comes to shechicha, there's a different pasuk. Me'enyani dekra dichsiv, it says, Ki siktzor ktsircha bisadecha, that when you harvest your harvest in your field, v'shachachta omer, and you forget a sheaf. Shechicha dumi the katzir. So we see the pasuk is juxtaposing ki siktzor ktsircha, so harvesting, basodcha v'shachachta, and you forget shechicha. So we're comparing shechicha and ktsira. So shechicha dumi de katzir, ma katzir begalui, af shechicha begalui. And just like when you harvest things that are out in the open, right? You harvest grain that's on a field. So also shechicha applies to things that are revealed, not things that are covered. Fine. Af shechicha begalui. Okay. Fine. So it would have to be revealed. It would have to be revealed to the exclusion of if it was covered. But then, Kasav Rachmana Basade. The pasuk continues and says, Basade. Why does it have to say Basade? Lirabos esatamun. It's coming to include, that extra word of Basade is coming to include if it's covered. So, according to the rabbis, at the end of the day, the psukim indicate by shechicha that it includes covered sheaves, but when it comes to egla arufa, there is no indication that covered would be included, rather covered is excluded by egla arufa. The Rabbi Yehuda nami tepok le mishichacha dumi de katzos. Now Rabbi Yehuda had learned out that covered is excluded from shichicha, and he learned it out from the pasuk of v'shachachta omer basade prat l'tamun. But why doesn't he learn it out like the rabbis initially had learned it out, which is that we compare shechicha to harvesting? Einochinami. So Gemara says, okay, yeah, good idea. Rabbi Yehuda learns out, right, shechicha, right, compare shechicha to harvesting, and therefore it has to be revealed, not covered. Fine. Ve'ela basade lamali. Okay, so if that's the case, then what does Rabbi Yehuda do with the word basade? The rabbis from the word basade, they say that word is actually now coming to include covered. What is Rabbi Yehuda, who excludes covered? What does he do with it? So miboile l'rabos shichichas kama. So Rabbi Yehuda learns that to include if you forget standing stalks, not just harvested stalks, but even standing stalks that are still unharvested. V'rabbanan shichichas kama minalahu. How do the rabbis learn out that shichicha applies to standing stalks? Nafkalu michisiktzor kitzircha bisadecha. You have to add the word v'shachachta. That we compare, right? V'sadecha v'shachachta. That shichicha applies even to like portions of your field that you forgot about to harvest. From Yehuda mibayle lichtor babo, and Rabbi Yehuda learns out from michisiktzor kitzircha bisadecha. And I think not necessarily from v'shachachta. He learns out like Rabbi Bo, Amr Rabbi Lazar, the Amr Rabbi Bo, Amr Rabbi Lazar, Prat. L'shetzafu omarin l'soch stei chaveiro. Okay, this is where things get a little bit technical and interesting. Now, when it says besadecha, means your field, but if some of your grain flew away into your friend's field and like landed someplace like on a stone on in your friend's field, so that would not be shechicha. V'abonin mi besadecha, and the rabbis learned that out from. It could have said Sotah, but it says Sodecha. Rabbi Yehuda b'Sotah b'Sodecha lo mashmalei. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't learn that. He doesn't learn that technical analysis of b'Sodecha. Fine, b'Seder. So that's where the rabbis learn that out from. That's where Rabbi Yehuda learns it out from. Fine, but the rabbis come to include covered when it comes to shechicha. Rabbi Yehuda excludes covered when it comes to shechicha. But the Gemara argued that that the rabbis, however, would agree that when it comes to Egla Arufa, a covered corpse would be excluded from Egla Arufa. Now, by Rabbi Yirmiyah asks a kasha. Safu omarin l'soch sadehu mahu. So now, what if some grain from your friend's field kind of flies into, gets blown into your field, and it lands on some kind of a stone. Like it doesn't land on the ground. It lands on like some kind of a platform. Mahu. Do we say avir sadek is sadadami? So do we say that, well, even though it's not on your ground, but it's like within the airspace of your field, so therefore it's considered like your field, and if you forget about it, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, alright, it's in the context of shichicha. So like before when we talked about your grain going into your friend's field, and then you forgot about it, it would not be shechicha. So now the question is, if now this grain flies into your field and it's like on some platform and you forgot about it, so do we say that it would be? So do we say it's like your field, and if you forget about stuff in your field, it's shechicha, you can't have it, you have to leave it for the anim? Or do we say, well, since it didn't land on your field, it landed on some kind of a platform, it's not considered like your field, and therefore it's not considered shechicha, and it's all yours? Omar le Rav Kahana le Rav Papi, v'amri lo Rav Kahana le Rav Zvid, tifshot leib de Rabba Bo. Let's learn it out from Rabba Bo. Amr Rabba Lazar, de Amr, who said, Prat l'shetzafu Omar in the soch stei chaveiro. That Rabba Bo had said the name of Rabba Lazar, that if your grain, blows into your friend's field and lands on some platform, not on the ground, and lands on some platform, and then you forget about that grain that went into your friend's field. So we say that it is not shechicha. It is not shechicha. But now the chaveiro in the soch sadeu lo. Now we want to say that only applies to. It's a little confusing because yes means no, no means yes. But okay, seder. But what we're saying is that halacha would only apply to your friend's field. That if your grain flies into your friend's field, so we're saying it's not shechicha, and then you forget about it, it's not shechicha, and you can have it. Implying though, but if his grain flew into your field and landed on a platform, so then it would be considered, and then you forget about it, it would be considered shechicha, and then therefore you cannot have it. You have to leave it for the poor people. But 1 second, that's not a good argument, because if you're being so medayek about Rabba Bo Amr Rabba Lazar, so they said l'soch sdei chaveiro, that when it flies into your friend's field, tzafu in that it's only not shechicha because it didn't land on the ground, it landed on some platform, munachin lo, but if it landed on the ground of your friend's field, it would be shechicha. Shechicha applies bisadecha, in your field. If it lands on the field, you're on the ground of your friend's field, obviously it's not shechicha for you. It's not your field anymore. So you can't be so medayek to say that, well, when it comes to your friend's field, it says tzafu, so dafka, if it's tzafu in your friend's field, but not in your field, I don't understand. Are you also going to imply that dafka, if it's tzafu, if it's landing on like a platform in his field, then it's not shechicha, but if it lands on his field, then it is shechicha? How could it be shechicha? It's not, it says bisadecha. One of the requirements for shechicha is it has to be your field. So, ela lesoch stei chavero vafilu munachin. So rather, if it goes into your friend's field, then even if it lands on the ground, so then it's also not shechicha, right? If your grain blows into your friend's field, whether it lands on a platform, whether it lands on the ground, it's not going to be shechicha. It's not your field anymore. By the ka'amar tzafu. So what does it mean tzafu? No, it doesn't mean that it landed on a platform. It means lo mishkachas lo ele b'tzafu. It means that how is the grain gonna get into the field? It means that they floated, that they blew away into the field. That's what it means. It means that it blew away into your friend's field, but not necessarily that it's on a platform or anything like that. Okay, fine. Tashma, coming here. Omer she'echzik bo lo licho la'ir. If you picked up a sheaf of grain and you're gonna bring it to some place, to some city, ve'nicho agabe chaver, and then you put it, but then you picked up this sheaf, but then you put it down. Then you put it down on top of another sheaf. Is sheaf even a word? I hope so. Like a grain thing. A sheaf. So you pick up one sheaf of grain, and you say you decide you're going to go travel someplace, but then you put it down on top of another sheaf of grain. V'shachacha, and you forgot about it. So now the question is it shechicha? So atachton shechicha, the bottom one is shechicha, ve'elyon eino shechicha, but the top one is not shechicha. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Omer says, Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Mishum Reb Shimon, the name of Reb Shimon, Shneim Einon Shechicha, neither one is Shechicha. Hatachnon Mipnei Shehu Tamun, well, because the bottom one is Tamun, so it's not going to be Shechicha. Ve'elyon Mipnei Shehu Tzaf, and the top one because it's floating. So, Adkan lo plige ele betachton, so we see that the machlokas between the Tanakama and let's just say, Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, the name of Reb Shimon, so let's say Reb Shimon, is betachton with regard to the bottom one. But everyone agrees that the top one won't be shechicha. So that seems to be implying that saf, that if it's not on the ground, if it's on top of something else, it's not shechicha. No, shiny awesome. No, you can't bring a proof from there because that's a different case. Because came to Achzik Bey, once he picked it up and said he's going to go travel to some city, he picked it up, Zocha Bey. Well, then it's his. It's no longer shechicha. He already picked it up. If that's the case, well then who cares the fact that why is it so important that he put it down on top of another one? He could have just put it down on the field. What? Yeah, the reason why it says that he put it on top of another sheaf, mishum tachton, is to teach us about the bottom one, whether it's tamun or not. But why do we say that he's allowed because it's tzaf? So no, it's like he was holding it kitzaf. It's as if he was like holding it the whole time and never actually like put it down. It was as if he was like holding it, and that's why it's his. All right, fine. Because I guess we didn't really learn much about tzaf necessarily by shechicha. Okay. Moving on. Amar Abaye says Abaye. I think we're done with the shechicha stuff. Actually, no, not entirely. Okay. Amar Abaye says Abaye. Arini ke ben Azza b'shukei Tiberia. Oh, we've seen this before. This phrase of I'm like Ben Azza in the market of Tiberia. That ask me anything in nowadays parlance. So Amar le'aumer derabanan. So a certain rabbi says to Abaye, le'Abaye shnei chalalim. So what if you have two corpses? Zel gabe zeh. You have one corpse on top of the other corpse, and one corpse is closer to city A, the other corpse is closer to city B. And the question is, do you measure from the top corpse, in which case city A brings the Egla Arufa, or do you measure from the bottom corpse, in which case city B would bring the Egla Arufa, right? Meaning whichever city is closer to the corpse. So Shnei Chalalim Zalgabi says, so if you have two corpses, one on top of the other, Mehechan hu moded. So which one do you measure from? Min b'mino have tamun, umin b'mino lo have tzaf. Do we say that when you have min b'mino, i.e. two corpses, so the bottom one won't be considered tamun, and if it's not considered, min b'mino have tamun, so we say that it is tamun, and we said that tamun, right, covered when it comes to Egla Arufa, is not chayiv in Egla Arufa. Umin b'mino lo have tzaf. And min b'mino is not tzaf, right? We said tzaf in the Mishnah. We said, right, tzaf agabi amayim. I guess it's the same idea. Tzaf, if it's floating, would not be considered, right? It says badom, right? I guess technically we said basod v'lo tzaf al pnei amayim, right? I think the point is the same thing, that if it's tzaf, then it wouldn't be egla rufa. But we say min b'mino lo have tzaf. It isn't tzaf. Umei elyon moded, in which case you would measure from the top one. Or dilma min b'mino have tzaf, or maybe min b'mino is tzaf. Umin b'mino lo avi tamun, but the bottom one won't be considered tamun. And if it's not tamun, mitachton moded. Well, then that would mean that you measure from the bottom one. Or min b'mino have tamun, or maybe min b'mino would be tamun. Umin b'mino have tzaf as well as tzaf. V'lo mitachton moded, v'lo me'elyun moded. In which case, you don't measure from either one of them. I guess you just don't do egla rufa in that case. So Omar le tnisua. So Abai says, well, what about the following? Brisa, I guess. Omer she'echzik bo lolicho la'ir, right, what we just said, that if a fellow picked up a sheaf of grain to go walk to some city, v'nicho al gabi chavero, and he put it down on top of another sheaf, v'shachacho, and he forgot about it, hatachton shechicho ve'elyon eno shechicho, the bottom one is shechicho, the top one is not shechicho. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, Reb Shimon shneim einon shechicha. Neither one is shechicha. Hatachton mipnei shu tamun, the bottom one because it's tamun, and therefore it's not shechicha. Ve'ayon mipnei shu tzaf, and the top one because it is tzaf. And we want to say savrua tane tanoi ki Reb Yehuda sviralu, and we want to say that both the Tanakama and Reb Shimon hold like Reb Yehuda the Omer besadet prad tamun, who says that by shechicha it excludes if it's covered. And then, so if that's the case, then how come the Tanakama says that the bottom one is shechicha? So my lab ba'akamiflige to my sover min b'mino abe tamun u my sover lo abe tamun. That the machlokas is that when you have one sheaf on top of another, does that make the bottom one tamun? Right? When it's the same item, right, the same type. Right, two sheaves, does that create tamun? Right, so we want to assume that both the Tanakama and Reb Shimon agree that if it were tamun, it would not be shechicha. But the question is it tamun? That the Tanakama holds min b'mino is not tamun, whereas Reb Shimon says min b'mino is tamun, and therefore it would be parted from shechicha. Lo ikir Rab Yehuda svir lehu. We say no. If they hold if both the Tanakama and Reb Shimon do in fact hold like Rabbi Yehuda that tamun is not shaykh to shechicha, well then the chuli alma min b'mino abe tamun, then everyone would also agree that min b'mino is tamun, and they would both agree that the bottom one would not be shechicha. But the thing is, they don't agree to Rabbi Yehuda. They're davka arguing about the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon of is tamun potter from shechicha or not. The Rabbanon k'Rabbanon that the Tanakama holds like the Rabbanon that tamun is chayiv in shechicha. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda k'Reb Yehuda. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda holds like Reb Yehuda that tamun would not be shechicha. Yachi, if that's the case, my iri agabe chavero afilu ba'afar v'tzor nami. If that's the case, well then why is it, if it has nothing to do with min b'mino, so then why is it important that it's one sheaf on top of the other? You could have just put it, could have been covered in rocks or the ground. It's just to show you that how far Rabbi Yehuda goes in his opinion, that even if it's min b'mino, that even if it's the same type, still he would consider it to be tamun. Okay, fine. Continues the Gemara Tana Rabbanan, the Rabbi said, Chalal v'lo chanuk. That when it says Chalal, so that implies like a sword or a knife or a a spear, like some kind of like knife wound. V'lo chanuk, as opposed to if a fellow was strangled to death. Chalo v'lo mefarper, not if he's flopping around. Ba'adama v'lo tamun, and not if he's covered. V'lo tamun bagal, not if he's covered. Nofel v'lo tali ba'ilon, if he's fallen but not hanging in a tree. Ba'sadeh v'lo tzaf al pnei hamayim, on a field but not floating on the water. Rabbi Elazar Omer says, Rabbi Elazar, bechulon im haya chalal orphan. It says, look, if he died from like a knife wound, a sword wound, so regardless if he's in a tree or anything like that, or floating, doesn't matter. If he died from a sword wound, so then you would do Egla Arufa. Tanya, Amr Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Amr lo Rabbi Elazar, they said to Rabbi Elazar, Yata Modeh, don't you agree, Shemaya Chanuk, that if he was strangled, Umuto Ba'ashba, and he was not in any of these other situations, he wasn't floating or anything, he was strangled and found in a dump, She'ain orphan, that you would not do Egla Arufa. So Alma Chalal v'lo chanuk, and it's because you say that's correct. You would not do Egla Arufa because he's strangled to death. So right, he would have to be a sword wound. So you learn out clearly then, Rabbi Elazar, you learn out that when the pasuk says Chalal, it means Chalal and not Chanuk. Killed by a sword wound, not by a strangulation, So Achanami, and say also when it says Ba'adama, v'lo tamun bagal, not covered in a pile of stones. No fail v'lo tali b'ilan, and not hanging in a tree. Basada v'lo tzaf al gabe mayim. Rabbi Elazar chalal yiser ksiv. To which Rabbi Elazar says, not necessarily. I understand your argument, but when it says chalal a lot of times in the context of Egla Rufa, right? Chalal ba'adama sheshem lekach nosin chalushta nofa ba'zad alon domiko v'haya ha'ir akrov el chalal. Okay, fine. I don't know. Does it say more times chalal? Because it says chalal a few times, and therefore it's to drive the point home that it has to be like a sword wound or a knife wound, not any other kind of wound. But that's not the case by these other things, and therefore badam, it says badama once. So therefore he says that doesn't, says like I don't hold that davka, that it would exclude covered in stones or floating on the water. I don't that. But for me, the only qualification, it has to be a knife wound. As long as it's a knife wound, so then you would do the Egla Arufa stuff. All right, fine. Okay. Now continues the Gemara. Where am I? Nimtza samuch l'sfar. If the corpse was found close to, in the boondocks, the far out neighborhoods, or to a city that is a majority of idolaters, that it has to be an anomaly, right? That it was found, not that it's common. And the assumption is in the boondocks, these murders are more common. Or a city that doesn't have a bezdin, to be in a ziknei ha'ir veleka. Well, you need ziknei ha'ir, the elders of the city, and if there's no bezdin, then there's no elders of the city. So we said, and we only measure to a city that has a bezdin. Pshita, obviously, came the tana la'ir she'ein ba bezdin. Since we already taught that there's no egla arufa when it comes to a city that doesn't have a bezdin, so obviously we only measure to a city that has a bezdin. So Kamash Malon, what it's teaching us is this. That if the corpse was found close to a city that does not have a bezdin, also bezdin. Therefore, it says that the elders of that city, go out whichever city that is. Meaning, if only we said that if there's no bezdin in the city, then there's no egla arufa. So then I would think that maybe there's no egla arufa at all. That if the closest city does not have a bezdin, you don't do egla arufa. But that's not the case. If the closest city to the corpse does not have a bezdin, so then you keep measuring to the next closest city, to the one that has a bezdin, right? So then, so you're measuring to the closest city that has a bezdin, but you're still going to find that city, right? It's not just if the first city doesn't have the bezdin, so then Egla Aruf is called off. No, you keep on measuring. And that, so I'll read that again. That's what, how do you know that if the corpse is closest to a city that does not have a bezdin? So you say, okay, fine. Well, let's find the next closest city that has a bezdin. Okay, fine. We are now up to a new Mishnah. What if the corpse was found smack in the middle of two cities? So what do? Which is the close? Right? Apparently there's no closer one. Smack in the middle. Shtein mevios shtei eglos divrei Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is each city brings a egla arufa. That's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Ve'en Yerushalayim mevi egla arufa. Jerusalem doesn't bring egla arufas. Nimtza rosho b'makom echad. What if the head is in one place, v'gufa b'makom acher, and the rest of his body is in another location? Molichin harosh eitz al haguf divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says you bring the head to the body. Rabbi Kiva Omer says Rabbi Kiva aguf eitz al harosh. Rabbi Kiva says fakert, you bring the body to the head. From which part of the body do you measure? From the feet, from the head. Rabbi Eliezer Omer mitiburo. Rabbi Eliezer says from his belly button, his navel. Rabbi Akiva Omer michotmo. Rabbi Akiva says from his shnaz, from his nose. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says mimakom shenaise chalu mitzavar. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says from his neck. Okay, where they slit his throat. My time, Rabbi Eliezer. How come Rabbi Eliezer says that each of the two cities bring an egla arufa? So ksaver efshur letzamtzin ukrova vafilu krovis. He holds two things. First of all, it's possible to have it smack in the middle, right? Meaning, if it were impossible to have smack in the middle, then that would mean that Memela, one city is going to have to be closer. And if one city is closer, then they can't each bring an egla arufa because one of them is going to be wrong and not necessary. So in that, if one of them was closer, it's just so close that you can't tell. Well, in that case, you would bring one egla arufa for the both of them, and they would make a condition, right? If we're the one that's closer, then you're being mocked, your part to us. If you're the one that's closer, they work it out with stipulations and stuff to make sure that the egla arufa is being brought properly. So the fact that Rabbi Eliezer says that they bring two egla arufas means that there is a possibility of it being smack in the middle and not closer to either one. And secondly, that when it says krova, it means even krovos, right? That when it says the closest city, it could even be the closest cities. So you could potentially have a situation where it's smack in the middle, and you'll have the two closest cities each bring an egla arufa. Yerushalayim mevia egla arufa, and Jerusalem does not bring egla arufas. The Amar because the pasuk says l'rishta. It says in the context of egla arufa, it says l'rishta, to inherit. V'kasav Yerushalayim lo nischalka l'shvatim, and the Tana of the Mishnah holds that Jerusalem was not divided up among the tribes. Nimtza roshu b'makom chulei. If his head was found in one place and the rest of his body in another place, b'maika miflegei. What's the machlokas? If we're talking about, with regard to measuring, where do we measure from? From the fact that the Mishnah continues and talks about where do you measure from, implying that the Reisha is not talking about, where do we measure from. No, the question is, where do you bury this corpse? And what we're saying is, do we say that the place where the head is where you bury the corpse, or do we say where the body is, that's where you bury the corpse? Where you find the head in one place and the body in another place, Rabbi Eliezer says that you bring the head to the body. Rabbi Kiva Omer aguf eitzel harosh, and Rabbi Kiva says you bring the body to the head. How come they have this machlokas? What's it based on? Marsaver gufe beduchte nafil reisha dinade v'nafil, because Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that when a person gets chopped down with a sword, his body immediately falls to the ground where he dies, and his head rolls to some other place. So therefore, you pick up the head and you bring it to the body. Marsaver, whereas Rabbi Akiva holds reisha eicha dinafil nafal gufa hu deroit azul. If the guy's running and somebody cuts off his head is going to immediately fall down, but his body is going to keep on moving, and they're going to keep on, running forward, not for long, but therefore you bring the body to the head. Okay. May ayin hayu modidin? Where would they? May ayin hayu modidin? May ayin hayu modidin? Where would they measure from? B'mayka mifkei. What's the machlokas? My sover ikr chiyusa ba'ape. Well, one opinion is that the main place of life is from the nose. Umar sover ikr chiyusa b'tibure. The other one says that the main part of the life is from the belly button. Lema kiani tanoi. Let's say it's like the following machlokas tanoim. Me'echan avlad notzer. Where is the fetus? Where does it develop from? Meirosho, from his head. And similarly it says, Mimei imi ata gozi. From my inside my mother, you are my head. V'omer gozi nizrech v'ashlichi v'chule. I don't know. The head of something to do with the head of your hair of your head. I don't know. Sensitive of big daf, your head. Abashol Omer says Abashol mitiburo. From the baby develops from the belly button. Mishalech sharoshav elach ve'elach, and then expands from there. So we want to say that the same machlokas in our Mishnah between do you measure from the nose or from the belly button is like the machlokas about where does a fetus develop from the head or from the belly button. We can say no, afilu tema abashol. No, even abashol says from the belly button. You could still say over here from the nose because adkan lo ka'amar abashol elini nitzira. That Abba says with development of the baby, ki dechi mitzar valad mimitziasa mitzar, that it develops from its belly button. Havalinian chiyusa, but with regard to life, t'chuliyama ba'ape, you would agree that it's from the shnaz. Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, kol asher nishmas ruach chaim ba'apa v'gomer, that which has life in his shnaz. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer says, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, mimakom shenai sechalo mitzaro, dafka from the neck. My time is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. How come Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says it's kedichsiv, like the puzzle says, l'osis oscho el tzavre chalole rishoyim, to the necks of the chalols of the nudniks. So we see that we're saying that a chalol, for example, like by egla arufa, is tzavar, is compared to the neck. So dafka we measure from the neck. Friends, that was a humongous daf. I don't know if it's over an hour. It might not be over an hour. It's probably over 50 minutes though. That was daf mem hey. Humongous daf of Masechta Sotah. We got 4 more daf in Masechta Sotah. They're all big. Peace out.